my god, this is so beautiful. Oh man, this is melting my heart. This is melting my heart. You know what, guys? I think we did good. I think we did really good. Now to get the other three endings. I hope I will survive this. I will survive this. I will survive this. I will survive. Oh my god, I regret saying anything. And most of all, I regret coming into this with that level of optimism that I originally did. I can see why there is this bit of controversy around this, especially around this ending from what I heard. Okay, let me break it all down for you. Basically, once I played the game for the first time and I managed to get to the best ending from the very beginning, then I figured that the best way to get the worst ending would be to do the complete opposite of what I did. And as I was playing the game, a small realization hit me that the choices that you make in game are basically split into three different categories. The first one are the choices that do not matter in the least. Like, for example, the choice where you get to choose whether you want to thank Nazar for being a bro or you want to go immediately to Spears. Another of those choices would be how you decide to compliment the band for their performance. These choices do not matter. No matter what you are going to do, the story is going to progress the same way that it normally would. Now, the choices that do matter are the ones that revolve around Anon and around Fang, and these choices directly correspond to the two most important pieces of advice that you have gotten, one from the very beginning of the game, and other as you were going through it. The choices that revolve around Anon are the ones that remind him that he's not the only person in the world. The choices that revolve around Fang are the ones where you are reminded that the secret to love is support. And let me break it down for you right now. When we arrive at Volcano High as Anon, we basically start as a typical image of a certain website user. You are a shut-in, an introvert, a little bit on the selfish and arrogant side. There is a little bit of egoism in you could even say. You don't exactly care about other people, you just want to skate through life and deal with your own stuff without ever reaching to anyone. And as you make choices as Anon, the choices that you are faced with allow you to either remain in this, you could say, mental gutter that you are up until this point, which means that you will still remain a relatively selfish, kind of an asshole, or you can finally get out of your comfort zone and start realizing that other people around you are also the ones with feelings. Some people know more than you. One of the good examples would be the scene with the cables. You trip over them, and the first thing that comes to your mind, I'm going to put them away so nobody is going to trip over them. But the correct answer is leave them alone, as you've seen me do this in my playthrough. Because, in the end, Anon realizes that he has no experience in cable management, and if Reed did this before many times, this means that he knows what he's doing. If we kept with an arrogant route and thought that we knew better, we could fix the cable, which ends up with the electricity going out near the end of the performance. Now, what happens in Route 1? in what I like to call its timeline, number one, is where Anon completely fails to grow as a person. Every single choice that he makes is the one where he stays in his old ways. He does not acknowledge that other people might have more experience than him. He has no backbone to confront his problems head on. And I'm talking about the scene where Naomi addresses the fact that she was setting us up with Fang. We had a choice to excuse ourselves, but this basically means that we are running away from the harsh reality of maybe I was played like a fiddle and not facing it head on. In the end, it results with Anon not exactly even being a bad person, but simply not growing enough as a person to face what's coming to him. At the same time, we have choices that revolve around Fang. And now here's the thing, because Fang's choices are the ones that are meant to show support from the very beginning. Even before we get advice from Mo that we should be supportive to Fang, we have a chance to show our support to them from the very beginning. One of these choices would be standing up for Fang when they are talking to Trish about becoming a regular band with normal bass, a guitar, and drum. If you stand up for Fang, then it will show them that you are there for them to support them. If you decided to shut up and not get involved because it's not your band, then eventually Reed is going to step in and suggest the same thing, but Fang will not see you in the same positive light as if you would just stand up there for them. Now, why am I talking about this? Because I believe that this is like the most important part of the entire breakdown is to understand the choices, the ones that help both Anon to grow as a person and to be there for Fang as a support. Now, that part out of the way, let's get to the entire the entire meat of the analysis and to the first ending. Now, you see, the trickiest thing is that at the very beginning, you will not see that much of a difference in behavior of yours and Fang's, regardless what kind of choices you make. The story will look relatively the same until it's too late to change anything. Then you will see how things slowly tumble downhill. The best, you could say, breaking point is what happens right after the auditorium scene, after we get exposed for our Photoshop skills with anime characters. That's when you know that you have one or two possible choices left, depending on what you choose, to set things straight. Like I said, we are at the ending one. All of our choices failed to help Anon become a better person, more understanding of others around him, and it failed to help us elevate Fang to a more self-confident person, to someone who knows that there are people around there to support them. In result, we as Anon are still that insecure shut in who does not want to do anything else other than to skate through the entire life while being unnoticed, and Fang remains that kind of person who never had anyone stand up for them. Because this is another tragic thing. Fang, as much as might seem like a relatively confident and strong person, they aren't. They are only putting up a facade, and the scene on the roof shows it the best. In that scene, Fang admits why they are behaving like that they are constantly living in the shadow of their own brother, and they are basically treated like problem child or the one with amazing imagination, depending which parent you are going to ask. All in all, it ends up with Fang being really insecure and needing some role model in their life that is not their parents. Because Fang clearly lets us know that their parents don't exactly seem to take their problems seriously. And this is where it all melts down. In this timeline, I'm going to keep calling them like that, Anon failed to evolve a tiny little bit beyond who he was. And Fang still remains an insecure person. For some reason, they love us, but we never did anything to actually warrant that love other than the fact that there is some new skinny guy around that is relatively pleasant to me as a dork. That's what's going through Fang's head. But in the end, they are still insecure to the point that after the scene in auditorium, we choose not to talk to Trish and we bail back home. Of course, we still earn ourselves a can to the head and a trip down the stairs. That part remains the same. However, 2 days later, Fang literally decided to apologize to Trish for breaking off with the band and returns to it. That's how incredibly insecure Fang was, and that's how much they depended on someone to guide them. And since we failed to fit that role, Fang got back to the only person that at least partially fit the bill, that being Trish. After that, there is not that much of a change, save for the scene with the date before the prom. These are different, but they are not that important to the story. I'm not going to discuss them. The main problem begins at the prom. When we start the prom, we notice Fang in a completely different creation than what we saw in ending number 4, which still actually looks kind of good. I have to admit this. It looks pretty okay. Unfortunately, during all this, Frank became more and more aggressive, you could say, even to the point of being arrogant in how they behave. Eventually, we are led to the prom. It turns out that Trish talked to Spears to let them play during the prom. At the very beginning, everything seems relatively okay, especially because of the fact that Fang was allowed to still play the guitar. So, trying to be the relatively supporting boyfriend that you are, even if you failed miserably until this point, you go with Fang and the gang to the prom, help them set up, and unfortunately, something happens. As you are setting up everything in Jingo's music room, Fang's string breaks during guitar tuning. Of course, this is something that nobody could have predicted, but unfortunately, they do not have a replacement string. As we try to help, Trish lashes out at us, and Fang asks us to leave the room. And since we never grew enough of a backbone to actually stand up for ourselves, we agree. Of course, Alan is still in shock, but that's about it. He does not object because he never had enough confidence to stand up for himself. The next thing that we witness is the prom hall, and we see how Worm Drama is setting up the stage, and that's when the first part of all hell breaks loose. We see that Fang got talked back into the idea of playing double bass. They had no extra strings, so instead of calling it quits and saying that it was an accident, Trish managed to talk Fang back into the idea of using double bass once again, with results that you could imagine. They sound atrocious, just like at the very beginning of the game when we saw them for the first time, and the reaction is as good as you could have guessed. Everybody are laughing at them, but now, in addition, they are throwing their drinks at the stage. Of course, the band quickly has to evacuate, they get mad, and Fang leaves with us back to our home. And this point, you could say, is basically the beginning of the end, because what unfolds here is what tips Fang to do what she was about to do. Let me explain. What happens is that we eventually get back to our home in Skin Row. Fang just had one of the worst, if not the worst day in her entire life. And since we, as Anon, never grew enough to properly handle situations like this, we are simply inexperienced to deal with this situation. At first, when I saw this, I was mad because what happens? Alan said that he wanted to play games on his console. He even offered Fang to play with him. The thing is, the Fang is not exactly a gamer, that's one thing, and the second thing is they just went through the worst day of their life. And like I said, at first I wanted to be mad at Anon, like, dude, what the hell you are doing? But then it hit me, he just was not prepared to handle this kind of thing. He never knew what to do. He never thought that he would have a girlfriend in the first place, let alone one that requires that much of help, especially in a moment like that. So Anon opted to do the one thing that always helped him when he felt like shit. He played games and offered Fang to play with him. And as much as this was a very bad choice, I mean, we can clearly see how he's playing games and Fang is laying on the bed, feeling terrible. They're still trying to at least pay attention to Anon. In a way, this is, I guess you could say that you could still relatively salvage it, even if what Alan does is not exactly well thought out. Like I said, he was just not prepared to handle all of this. And as much as it makes me angry, I cannot be mad at him. He just had no idea how to handle it. Unfortunately, something more happens, because during the later chat, Anon basically lets it slip that their entire relationship started because of Naomi's plan. And this is the breaking point for Fang, because like I said, I already said enough about Anon and how he failed to grow as a person, or more like how we failed to help him grow as a person. But now we're moving on to the Fang side. As I said, they were constantly pushed down. All of their ideas were ignored. Fang was constantly forced to take a step back and let someone else take the reins. Even with their band, at the end, Trish acts like it's her band and not Fang's. I'm trying to imagine, put yourself in the mind space of a person like Fang. At first, you start hating yourself because of one irresponsible answer your younger brother almost dies, and you live with a self-hate for all this time. Your father does not exactly give too much of a damn about you, considering you the problem child, and constantly argues about you. Your mother, while not malicious, constantly thinks that what you do is basically just playing pretend. You just do not feel like anyone is taking you seriously. All your problems are either shouted down or trivialized. And then you make a band, and that band is quickly hijacked by your friend, who, instead of trying to do it as a fun thing, she immediately tries to make it as being big, making it big in the world, earning money and so on. And while okay, some bands succeed, the problem is that Trish did this in a completely tone-deaf way, tearing away the only thing that Fang had that made them happy. We live like that through most of high school. Every single of our shows turns out to be a complete shit show with everybody laughing at us. And then you meet that weird dweeb who, oddly enough, actually makes you feel nice. And as you live with that dweeb, he makes you feel a little bit better. He's not that of a strong character, he's not that supportive, but for some reason, maybe simply because of the fact that this is a new person in your life, you actually feel better about yourself. Just to hear, after experiencing one of the worst nights of your life, that all your relationship with this dweeb was a setup by someone else who is dating your brother, just so this dweeb that you thought you had feelings for and you thought had feelings for you could fix you, so you would not be a problem to your brother, so that person could spend more time with your brother. Because this is exactly what happened, or at least that's what the original plan of Naomi was, to hitch Fang and Anon, so Anon could fix Fang, so Naomi could have Nazar all to herself. With all that in mind, think how incredibly painful it had to be to Fang. After the revelation, Fang loses it, and it's actually pretty justifiable. It's really hard to hold this against them, considering every single thing that happened. Fang goes into a rage fit, begins to demolish Anon's apartment, and breaks down. We barely managed to contain Fang, to calm them down. And the worst thing is that even now, with everything that happened, Anon is still too tone deaf to properly realize what's going on, because in his mind all of this will blow over. And he does not recognize any of the warning signs, because what happens afterwards? At one point, Fang comes back to Anon's place, seemingly in way better mood, and she asks Anon for a night of closeness, and Anon thinks that maybe this is Fang's way of coping with it, of feeling better with everything, and unfortunately does not notice the bag that Fang has with them. And that's where everything keeps going downhill, because on the next day, Anon wakes up realizing that he overslept. His alarm clock did not go off. Someone turned it off. He rushes to school only to see one of the worst things that anyone could ever witness while going to school. Everybody huddled up in front of the building, Trish shouting accusations at us, and somehow Alan manages to make it inside, noticing the entire scene, noticing the bodies on the ground. And while it's never disclosed, I believe that what happened was, well, first thing first, the most tragic thing is that even despite everything that happened, Fang still loves Alan enough to try and spare him from what they're about to do by making sure that his alarm clock will not ring. And like I said, it was never disclosed what exactly happened in school, how it went step by step, but I can imagine that the first target for Fang would be Naomi. After that, Nazar tries to jump in and disarm his sibling, gets a bullet. After that, Fang very possibly starts to shoot at anyone who might be nearby and makes it to the roof. We enter the school just to bear witness to what Fang did to every single poor schmuck that managed to get in front of her, and we try to make it after them and find them on the roof. Turns out that our words startled Fang enough to earn us a bullet to the leg. This scene is even more heartbreaking because the school shooting and everything is already a tragedy, but looking at this from the more personal level, Anon is still relatively a selfish prick, because the only thing he can say is to beg Fang not to leave him alone, that he does not want to be left alone. And as he crawls to her, begging her to come back, we are given that one most heartbreaking smile that there is, and after that Fang jumps, ending her life instantly. Anon faints from the shock and wakes up a couple days later in a hospital. In the last scene, we get to see how he stands very far away at the graveyard, not wanting to disturb the funeral. I think this is the first moment in his life where he becomes at least a little bit self-aware and admits that him being too close at this moment would desecrate the grave of the only person that he ever loved. The last scene we see is where the crowd slowly dissipates at the very ending. Fang's dad finally leaves, and Anon approaches the two graves, one belonging to Fang and other belonging to Nazar. And this is the ending of the first timeline, of the first route. And you know, at first when I saw it, I felt like something or someone punched my gut with the strength of a bulldozer. And then I began thinking, because it reminded me that some people said that the first ending was a mockery, that there was a school shooting because Fang was from LGBT. And I can tell you that this is a load of bullshit. Remember what I said during the ending of my original playthrough? This is a story of people who are trying to figure out who they are and make something of themselves. And this is still the same story, just with way worse outcome, because I believe that this is something that could happen to anyone. The fact that Fang in this case was non-binary has nothing to do with the story at all. It's a story about two people who somehow got together, and one of them failed to grow as a person and could not stand up for themselves or his significant other, in this case Fang, and a story about a person who kept being pushed down, had their hopes, dreams, worries, everything in their life trivialized to the point where they felt that they will never be able to amount to anything. I believe this is why Fang acted in an aggressive way. It was their way to protect themselves, that was a defense mechanism. And this is exactly where it all crashes down. Once again, this has nothing to do with flag people, and I'm a flag person, so this has nothing to do with it. What it really is, like I said, a story of a really, really broken person who not once in their life could catch a break from everything that was going on. Because by the end, this is exactly what you are getting here. You have a person who never ever had anyone to stand up for them, and every single thing in their life, even their moderately successful relationship, torn away from them forcefully. The point where they could just not handle it anymore and decided to go with the worst possible solution simply because they believe they have nothing left for them in this life. This is indeed a tragic story, but it has nothing, absolutely nothing to do with Fang's identity. It has a lot to do with Fang's entire life and how things panned out for them. Oh my god, I really hope that the other endings will not be as bad. You know, I really need to learn to keep my fucking mouth shut. Because this ending was like a hit with a rake to the crotch. I think the only reason why this ending is above the first one is because nobody dies in here, but that's about it. In order to get this one, we cannot grow as Anon, and we instead have to focus entirely on Fang. Once that happens, Fang becomes way more confident in everything they do, unfortunately to the point of being aggressive and even at times arrogant. And the problem is that we as Anon do not even try to understand Fang and everything. This is the main problem. As we progress through the entire story, we can see how Fang is slowly becoming more and more confident in everything that they do, but as Anon, there is no understanding in what Fang does, what goes through their head. I'm going to use the kind of language that I really dislike, but in a way, we become a simp. In the end, there's even a scene where Anon learns to respect pronouns of Fang, which in its way is a really good thing, but then it's shown how Anon goes on social media and you'll see Anon posting stuff that is usually seen in memes about people from certain environments. Let's call it like that. The worst thing is that he does it even without any conviction. He says it almost as if he was waiting for some brownie points online. But this is not what I'm going to talk about right now. It's about what we basically helped to create, because as I said, we as Anon became extremely supportive of Fang, but without any deeper thought, without trying to understand Fang and what's going through their head. We basically constantly say yes to everything they do without ever trying to understand or analyze anything. Almost as if we were afraid to say no, which in a way is exactly what's happening. Fang, on the other hand, becomes extremely self-confident, like I already mentioned, almost to the point of arrogance, and once again, everything pans out properly after the scene in the auditorium. Fang decides to cut contacts with Trish in a very aggressive way and stays with us. Of course, after Fang nurses us back to health, things seem relatively normal. The main difference is that in this timeline, we do not go to prom. Once the prom is announced, at first it seems like we are going, but in the end it turns out that Fang does not want to go. And Anon, not wanting to be problematic boyfriend, does not object to it. In the end, it turns out that both Anon and Fang go to the beach and simply decided to get drunk. The problem is that Anon cannot hold his alcohol down that well, and this is where the entire thing spirals out of control, because the moment that alcohol starts to take over Anon's mind is when he actually starts to finally speak his own mind about some of the things that Fang did, some of the things that he disagrees, but since he never grew to be a more mature person, he doesn't even know how to properly take this conversation. In the end, they both start arguing with each other. Anon finally lashes out at Fang, saying a couple of choice words that I believed anyone would get angry at those, but I'm not going to go that deep. After all, it's alcohol. It doesn't justify it, but in a way it shows what's going on through your head. One way or another, it ends up with Anon getting pelted in the face, and as he's laying there on the sand, extremely drunk and still not fully processing what's going on, he only hears how Fang says, "Trish was right about you." After that, the scene cuts to the future. Turns out that Anon went to the military, where he became the bitch of the group and even got a couple of tattoos forcefully applied to his body. After that, he returned back to his place in Skin Row, trying to skate through life on government cash for a military vet, and at one point he really wants to eat some pizza and goes to a local pizza place that also has a stage for local artists open microphone nights. And as he's waiting for his pizza, he notices none else than Fang, completely changed. Fang's beautiful hair shaved nearly to a bald head, tattoos applied on their body. Fang turned into a junkie. And it's even more heartbreaking when you read that Anon really wants to approach Fang, that he really wants to extend his hand and make things good, but his inner lack of backbone, his inability to deal with anything that's going on and acting with a little bit of confidence results with him giving up on the idea. Just takes his pizza, and the scene and the entire timeline ends with Anon saying that this will be better for both of them. And it's heartbreaking. That's really heartbreaking. While I was recording all of this, while I was preparing to make all of this, I heard a lot of comments, once again from LGBT people, that this ending is also a mockery, that Fang becomes a junkie because she's non-binary. And once again, I'm saying that these people are wrong. You do not need to be a non-binary person to end up as a junkie. What happened here is basically we helped elevate Fang to the point where their self-confidence went through the roof. Fang became really aggressive in their way of being, and I also cannot be mad at this. I cannot be angry at Fang because, like we established before, Fang believes that they were surrounded by enemies. Once again, starting from the very beginning, Fang's hatred towards themselves because of what happened to Nazar. Fang's problem with their parents. Fang's dad does not give a damn about Fang and their dreams and aspirations. To Ripley, Fang is a problem child who should shut up and learn how to behave properly. To Samantha, Fang is the kid with imagination. That's the best thing that we can say. Eventually, as things go on through the high school, we can add Trish to the mix, who first hijacks Fang's idea of a band and then goes to some really nasty lengths just to put a wedge between Fang and their boyfriend. And even if at the end Fang admits that Trish was right about us, Fang's arrogance and hubris and self-defense mechanism do not allow them to extend hand back to Trish. To Fang, this is already a burned bridge, and this is exactly where this goes. Fang believes that they are surrounded by enemies, that every single person out there is just to screw with them and to cause problems. So Fang does the only thing that seems like a sensible thing to do, that makes sense to Fang in their mind. They burn every single bridge that there was, with their friends, with their family, with anyone that ever did a single little bit of wrong against Fang. Unfortunately, having nobody to rely on also means that Fang is out there on their own, which unfortunately leads to this situation. But once again, this is not a mockery of a non-binary person being left alone in the sand. This is a story about a broken person who believes that they are surrounded by enemies on every single side and choosing to live on their own because in their misery they feel more safe than risking to open up for a new person. And the saddest part is that there's a lot of people in the world who had exactly this happen to them, regardless of how they identify. And maybe so many people hate this ending because they actually see themselves in Anon or in Fang, and they are terrified of the prospect that this might be them a couple of years into the future. Please, God, just please let at least ending 3 be more, I don't even want to say enjoyable, just something that my stomach can tolerate. Oh my gosh, look! Sunshine, Fang hugging out with Anon, and people who think that this ending is happy are also wrong. Now, I'm sorry for seeming like a contrarian bitch, but after digging a little bit deeper into this, I realized that this ending is bittersweet at best. In this ending, we do a complete 180. We do not support Fang in anything that they do, and not out of malice, but because we are simply a dumbass. At the same, we as Anon grow as a person who becomes way more confident, way more mature with everything that they do, but once again we fail to support Fang with anything that they do. Once again, in the scene after the auditorium, after we take a tumble down the stairs, Fang once again nurses us back to full health, but then change in Fang's behavior becomes extremely apparent. Like I said, with everything that was going on in Fang's life, with everything that they tried to do, Fang still needed someone to rely on, and since we failed to elevate Fang to the point where they would become more self-confident and more independent, completely unknowingly and without any malice, we made Fang dependent on us. Of course, the scene in the auditorium results with Fang cutting contact with Trish, and I mean completely cutting contact. It's not, I need a break. It's not, you fucked with my boyfriend, so you are a bad person and I'm never talking to you again. In this specific timeline, in ending 3, Fang literally becomes afraid of Trish. But how could she do something like that? And from one side, that kind of thinking is justified. I'm not going to say it's not. But the main problem is how Fang approaches it. Because in this timeline, we realize we are being told that Fang decided to give that non-binary thing a try because Trish suggested it, and there is nothing wrong with that, with trying to figure out what's going on. Right now, what happened? The action that Trish took made Fang so scared, so afraid of Trish, that in a way, Fang started to reject everything that ever came from Trish into their life. And considering that we, as Alan, grew as a person, just completely oblivious to the needs of other people, Fang decided to drop everything that was ever associated with Trish in their life. And at this point, Fang became Lucy. And from now on, I'm going to refer to Fang as Lucy. We managed to actually have a relatively nice life until the time of the prom. Lucy is being really happy with us, and she's doing as much as she can to make us happy. And from one side, it makes Anon happy, but the main problem is that all this mix of choices makes it so Anon indeed becomes a more independent, more mindful person, but at the same time he becomes completely oblivious to Lucy's needs. And once again, I am not saying that he's doing this with malice, he's doing it because he's just too dumb to realize. And all of this fragility in Lucy can be seen perfectly during the prom night. And I have to admit that out of all of the creations that Lucy or Fang puts on before the prom night, this dress has to be actually the prettiest, but it's a very subjective opinion. The problems start once Naomi starts talking to Lucy, because in Naomi's mind, she achieved her victory. Fang became fixed, as in became a nice, non-problematic girl, which couldn't be further from the truth. As Lucy makes it down the stairs and shows everyone her creation, which is beautiful once again, Naomi starts bombarding Lucy with regular chit-chat, small talk, overwhelming her. And this is the first moment where it shows how broken and insecure Lucy is on the inside. It continues through the prom to the point where Naomi's chattering completely overwhelms Lucy and she has to evacuate. Thankfully, we leave with her and return back to Lucy's home, where we have our own slow dance and realize that she has UV markings on her body, which, by the way, look beautiful. I know that this is a silly interjection, but that mental image is beautiful, and I'm showing this to you right now so you can enjoy it with me. However, what happens afterwards, after that night, shows more and more apparently how incredibly dependent on us Lucy became, especially the scene when she leans against us. And from one side, I know that there are people who think that this is a good scene. It shows that Lucy loves us, because she does, but she does it in such an insecure way that it just hurts to see that she has absolutely no one else to lean upon. The only good thing that comes from here is that somehow she manages to fix her relationship with Nazar, at least a little bit, but that's about it. In the end, Alan decides to go to the military again, just to a different group, I believe, leaving Lucy behind and saying that he will come back. The entire scene at the bus stop where he's waiting to be picked up for deployment is even more heartbreaking, showing how incredibly sad and lost Lucy is. And she even says that she doesn't know if she'll be able to cope with everything that's going on. But unfortunately, it's too late to change his mind, and Anon gets on the bus and departs. Then we cut to a couple of years later when Anon comes back from the military and makes it back to Vol Caldera. And in a lovely coincidence, you could say, as he strolls through the park, thinking what to do with himself at this moment and where to go, he gets almost, you could say, assaulted by Lucy, who jumps at him, happy to see him again. This is where I started feeling really sad for her, because, I mean, okay, from one side she was happy, but she did a complete 180 from what she used to be before. Like earlier she was rocking this goth girl type, now she looks very timid and traditional. And while there's absolutely nothing wrong with this, her confession later almost broke my heart, but it's not in the way that you would think. Lucy confesses that after Anon left, she had no one to rely on and no one to lean against. She came back home, calmed down, and from one side, this bit isn't bad, but she needed to feel like she belongs somewhere. She needed a sense of togetherness and community. And in this case, she decided to go to the local church community, because there she found welcoming people. And even if it was slowly going better for her, because, let's be honest, not trying to defend church people over here, what I can say that in communities like that, 80% of the people who attend are there simply because they are lonely and they needed to feel like they belong somewhere, and that's about it. There is absolutely nothing wrong with trying to fight loneliness this way. Problem is what happens afterward. during the period where Anna was away, Lucy was trying to fill that hole in her heart and found out that she is a really good caretaker for the kids, that it really gives her a sense of fulfillment and happiness. And in this case, I'm actually really happy for her, because why not? If this makes her happy, then by all means, go for it. The problem is that she started to give up everything that she used to love in the past, including music. And only in this moment, Anon finally realizes how much Lucy sacrificed and how much his inability to support her caused her to withdraw from everything that used to give her pleasure in the past. In the next scene, we see how Anon takes Lucy to Dino Mo's for a pizza, and it's described how there is an old piano in the corner, and Anon finally takes a little bit of initiative and tries to support Lucy, push her in the right direction to try and get back into music. He asks her to sit at the piano, and much to Lucy's surprise, she still can play it. She plays the song from the roof and does it beautifully, and this is the moment where, at least I'd like to believe, Anon realizes how much he, in a way, screwed up, though it's not said directly, and from this moment he will try to support her to return back to what she was doing. The entire story ends with the picture of him and Lucy embracing each other, and then we cut to credits. And like I said, many people consider this specific ending to also be a happy. To me, it's a bittersweet ending, because of course they got back together, they are happy with each other, but I personally think, like I said, it's sad with silver lining or bittersweet, because it shows what happens when someone gets so dependent on other person that they cannot imagine their entire life without that person in it. I even heard a couple of comments that in this ending, Lucy gets quote-unquote fucked straight, but I can promise you that this comes from people who never played this. Lucy becoming straight, or not non-binary, so I guess binary again, has nothing to do with our pressure. This was entirely Lucy's choice, even if it was made, you could say in fear, but it was made in fear from what has become of one of her best friends from the past, aka Trish, rather than us pressuring her into this. But yeah, the main moral of the story is that if you rely on your love interest, on your partner too much, it's going to end up with a situation where you will not be able to function as a person should anything happen to them, and they will disappear from your life, be it for an extended period of time or even forever. This is why I consider this to be a bittersweet ending, because true, they got back together, they are happy, but there was a lot of sacrifice to be done, especially from Lucy, simply because she was unable to go on without the one person that she loved, and because we as Anon were too dumb to realize that we should have stayed behind, and instead of pursuing our own goals, we should focus on the person that we love and help to elevate her before we can do anything else. Okay, I admit, after the previous 3 endings, I had to replay the game once again and get the 4th ending just as a palate cleanser and to collect my thoughts about everything. But since you guys already seen the entire story that leads to ending 4, the entire ending 4 timeline, you could say, I'm gonna keep this one brief. What we see over here is a story, like I said, of 2 not exactly perfectly complete people, you could even say pretty broken people, trying to find their place in the world that's surrounding them and trying to figure out who they are. And they do it perfectly. Anon grows to become an independent and strong person who is mindful of those surrounding him. Fang grows to become a strong and independent person who can realize her own shortcomings. I believe this is the most important part, who finally allows herself to open up to the idea that maybe the thing that she does is not exactly the best. This is also the story where Fang realizes that she is not non-binary, but not because anyone forces her into it, but simply because she does not feel it. And I cannot be mad at someone for making that kind of decision. This is basically a story of two people trying to become responsible adults. And as such, I love it because in the end, they both grew to the point where they can be perfectly independent people and make it on their own without problem, without having to rely on each other. They chose to get back together simply because they loved each other's company and loved to make each other happy. And as I said, this is the best foundation for any relationship that you could ever hope to have. Instead of trying to fill that empty hole with someone, learn to love yourself, learn to live with yourself, and then let that person that you are in love with be the cherry on top instead of the missing piece. And I am just so happy that I got to witness this story once again, because out of all 4 endings, I believe that this one is the golden one. And once again, I have to say that despite all the hate that has been going on around this game, I am leaning way more towards the other side, the one that actually loves it. And I'm happy that I got to play through this game. And as a surprise, this is not over yet, bitches, because after going through all the extra stories, there's more stuff to check out. And in the next episode, I'm going to check through the bonus chapters, because now after all the chapters endings have been unlocked, I get to witness everything over there, so I want to check it with you. And since I am on a complete Snoot brain rot at the moment, once we are done with the bonus chapters, I got a couple of people to recommend me the best possible mods for this game, and after bonus chapters we are going with mods. So do not go anywhere, because it's not over yet. Well, at least when it comes to the entire content. Unfortunately, the episode itself is coming to an end. So, without making it any longer, without dragging it any further, I really hope that you enjoyed this episode, and this little analysis is the first that I ever did. I never did any analysis video like that, so I really hope that I did not bore you to death. That's the most important part. Anyways, thank you for sticking by. I really hope that you enjoyed this episode, and as always, I will see you in the next video. Have a great one.